It's now time for the Billy C. Show, part of the BillyCBoxing.com network.
And we're coming to you live from the Billy C. Studios in Lake George, New York. I'm Bill Calogero, and it's time for the Billy C. Show. Good morning, good day, good evening, whenever you're watching, whenever you're listening. I hope you're doing okay today. Today's show is being brought to us in part by, you guessed it, my book, Tom Molyneux, From Bondage to Baddest Man on the Planet, is available right now where all good books are sold, and you can get a copy of this book right now, whenever you're watching or listening to this show. Just visit Amazon.com. If you're looking to get a signed copy, drop me an email, man. Billy at Talkin' Boxing, TalkinBoxing.com. Today's show is also being brought to us in part by BillyCBoxing.com. Check it out for the latest and greatest news. Hey, I'm going to also give you a plug. Today's show is also being brought to us in part by StrictlyBusinessBoxing.com. My man, Coach, is always promoting Billy C. Boxing, and he points out utilizes some of our blasts from the past and points out some of our events and all that happy stuff. So visit StrictlyBusinessBoxing.com. Give everybody a shout out who's in the chat room right now. Alex Pierpaoli joins us in a little bit. Today's show, we're going to be talking. Look, people ask me all the time, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? How come you're not, on this show or that show? Or how come you're not with ESPN? Or, you know why? I'll tell you why. Because topics like today's show, that's the reason why. I'm not going to be an ass kisser to anybody. I'm going to tell it like it is. And today's show, I'm going to tell you like it is about the Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul, the aftermath, the event. I'm going to give you my thoughts on the whole damn thing, okay? And also coming up on, it's going to be the truth, no BS, so be ready for that, okay? Coming up also, I'm going to give you some fight results that took place last week as well. I got a listener email and a bunch of other stuff, okay? But Foist, I just want to get you first of all, I want to give a shout out to everybody in the chat room. Glad you could join us. But first, I want to just mention some news. It was announced that on February 1st, in the light heavyweight division, I hate using this word, but I'm going to use it, the WBC interim light heavyweight champion, David Benavidez, the guy everybody wants Canelo to fight. He's going to be taking on the WBA light heavyweight champion, David Morrell Jr. It's going to be taking place February 1st. And here's where the no BS comes in. It's another PBC event. I'm sure the rest of the card is going to suck. And I'll tell you another thing. The views aren't going to be that good because it's a pay-per-view. Look, this PBC, Al Heyman, when he first came out, everybody was, he's going to save boxing, save it. And they bombarded us with a bunch of shows for free. And I can't remember the last time he had a free show. It was either streamed or a pay-per-view. I doubt this is going to do well, but I will tell you this. It is a good fight. I like the matchup for sure. And just a couple of notes about some results before we get right into it. In a unification fight in the cruiserweight division, you all know that I love the cruiserweight division. Gilberto Ramirez improved to 47-1 with 30 knockouts when he defended his WBO and defended his WBA and picked up the WBO title from Chris Billiam Smith, who drops to 20-2. The way the scores sort, 116, 112 twice. Excuse me, and 116, 113. My thoughts on the fight, I was a little surprised, but Zurdo, because Billiam Smith is a good fighter, excuse me, he just couldn't, it just seemed like he couldn't hurt Zurdo. And Zurdo kind of reminds me of a fictional character. Gosh. He had no emotion. He plotted, and he won. So congrats to him. I wanted to talk about that fight. Gosh, I wasn't coughing at all till I went on air. It must be the air in here. But speaking about the air, let's make it a little brighter. Joining us right now, the man, the myth, the legend himself. Last time he had an opportunity to be on the show, but I screwed up. My hardware failed, but we got it fixed. Joining us right now is my man, Alex Pierpaoli. What's up, brother? Yeah, right.
I hope
That's
you
what
can
I
hear
heard,
me.
but everybody else heard you. It's like it was totally on my end. How you doing, brother?
I am doing very well, Billy C. It's great to see you. I'm sorry to hear you sound like you got a little sniffles there. Hopefully, it's just the mold in the basement.
I guess. Yeah, I mean,
The multi-million
don't
dollar Billy C studio
don't
complex.
worry. All I got to do with the mold, as soon as I bring the lawnmower in to cut it down, it should be all right. But let's listen. This show, we're going to talk mostly about Mike Tyson and Jake Paul, but let's talk about the best fight of the night first. Katie Taylor took another close one against Amanda Serrano, 95-94, with the way all three judges saw it. And, I hear the term robbery a lot, Alex, specifically when you're talking about these two fighters. And keeping in mind that score, 95-94, included a point deduction from Katie Taylor for headbutting. So really, it was a 2-round swing, which is a close fight, in my opinion. You could score that fight depending upon, the judge. I obviously Katie Taylor, in my opinion, landed the meaningful punches. She was definitely landing harder shots, and she was punching in barrage in bunches. But Serrano landed more shots and was, a little more. I'd say her style was a little more interesting to see her. Plus, she was, extremely much smaller. I thought the fight was close. I'm not calling it a robbery, but my first comment is how and why did they let the fight continue with that cut? It was another one of those horrific cuts. Amanda Serrano was a beautiful girl. Maybe not so much anymore. That cut will never heal. And it's always going to be a weak spot for her. And as far as the headbutts, they all mention that Katie Taylor throws a lot of lands headbutts. Headbutts happen. But to be honest with you, Alex, they didn't look intentional to me. It's her style where she comes in. Evander Holyfield was like that. Timothy Bradley was like that. Bernard Hopkins was like that. I mean, an intentional headbutt is when you launch with your head. And I don't think she did that. What's your thoughts on the fight?
I thought it was another sensational fight, and I still think the first one was a little better, as much as this was remarkable as well. I kind of knew that that fight was going to steal the show on the night, and it did. I had it. I couldn't score it live because I had so many streaming problems. So I lost track of the rounds and then got it back, got the streaming back. And so got to the end and I wasn't really sure how it scored it. So the next morning I scored it and I actually had it exactly like the judges. I had it 95-94 for Katie Taylor, 6-4. So that's a very close fight. Now, 6-4, if you give Serrano one more round, it's even. If you give her 2 more rounds, it breaks her way. I think the interesting thing that shows to me it's not a robbery is it was unanimous. They all had it for Katie. The punch stats, I think part of the problem was you had an incredible amount of uneducated eyes on this fight. You also they gave Serrano's dubious trainer, incredible amount of uninterrupted microphone time to air his many grievances. And this was not Festivus. I think if Larry Merchant was interviewing, he would have given him a good shove at the end there because nobody needed to hear from him. And I think people were swayed by that. I think you're right about the cut. I think in a lot of states, that fight would have been stopped.
It was an inch and a half thick.
Oh, it was horrendous. It was the skin was flapping down.
When you know how sometimes you see a bad cut and then the doctor goes and inspects it and he's ripping it apart and stuff. It looked like that before.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't know how. I didn't hear of how many stitches she had, but
it's gonna
it had to be a bunch, right?
Oh, it's got to be, and there got to be internal stitches. And you're right. I mean, you hate to say this about females, but it does remind me about that the scene in Raging Bull where remember Vicky says Gennaro, he's a good looking guy, and then L'Amato beats the hell out of him, and the two guys in the crowd look at each other. He ain't pretty no more.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, about the scoring, and then I want to get right into Tyson, but about that scoring, you know, it's true that Amanda Serrano was looking real good in their boxing, you know, landing all those punches. But I think what swayed the judges was when Katie Taylor, and she was able to do this from round one all the way to the final bell, when Katie Taylor, you know, pulled the Sugar Ray Leonard MO where, you know, she would come on real strong, she was relentless, and those punches and bunches were, I mean, they were pinpointed. I mean, they were all landing, and they were hard. You know, I mean, credit to both of those women for staying on their feet.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, Serrano, I think there was 2 clear rounds where Serrano hurt Taylor. Otherwise, I think it was Katie Taylor who would fire off this barrage of like 4 to 5 punches, and 2 or 3 of them would land clean. And, you know, I think that's what, you know, that's what boxing is. It's not about volume. And I think the other thing that, you know, again, and I know this is one of your pet peeves, the incredible insistence on look at these punch stats as if they mean anything. They don't. And I think that's the thing, is that boxing is not scored by, you look at the end of the fight and you figure, well, who do I feel like won? That's not how it works. You score each individual round, and then you add up the scores. And when you do that, it's Katie Taylor. At least now, not to say that if you had it 6-4 for Serrano, I totally get it. I get it. Right. I didn't see it that way, and neither did the official judges. You know, so I think Katie Taylor has won 2 razor-thin decisions over Amanda Serrano. Are they going to have a third one? I don't know. You know, I mean, I think one of the things that this fight was very clear is in terms of Katie is showing her age. I mean, she is a preternatural force. How she is able to look as exhausted as she did, yet gut it out. Oh my God. And you could tell just from like that sort of amateur days sort of strategy is always look like you're handling it. She was the one standing in the center of the ring at the beginning of each round, as exhausted as she was. That's one of those things you do in the amateurs. Like, you don't want to show like, I'm having a hard time here. Just in case the judges are looking like, who is having a hard time, you know, and have that work against you. In terms of the headbutts, yeah, I think her style, and this was in a case in the Chantel Cameron fights too, she does try to get to that close position first. And whenever you try to get there first, you are going to use your head. You might use your head, you know, like you said, Evander Holyfield, Tim Bradley. You know, is it intentional? There was a moment or two towards the end of the 3rd round, I think, where I thought, wow, that seemed like that was intentional. But, you know, is she a cheater? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
The way Serrano's trainer was going on, that was just absolutely ludicrous. And you could see what a fraud he is, or what a joke, because look how quickly he was to say, "Oh, do you want us to fight in the PFL?" Like here he is, these ladies gave so much to boxing. Oh, but if you have a good fight for us in another league, we'll do it. So it's like, what a joke.
Maldonado, he's always been
and I think he was arrested for steroid sales at one point.
Well, he mustn't be doing them anymore, because he did. That's one thing I noticed. He was a little smaller than he usually is. But all right, the fight. Mike Tyson against Jake Paul. Okay, in case you were under a rock, Jake Paul won the fight 80-72, 79-73 twice. Here's the thing. First and foremost, it was a great event, and it brought people. I was getting calls and texts that night from everybody, people I know that are not boxing fans, and everyone was tuned into that fight. All right, and everyone our age. I'm older than you by a decade, but my age, and
I don't feel like it anymore.
Well, how do you think I feel? But anyway, we all wanted Mike Tyson to win. Anybody that was over 45 wanted Mike Tyson to win. We all saw the clips of him training and everything else. So before I get into all the other things I am dying to say about this event, I will say this about the fight. I've heard and seen and talked to people for the whole week about how they feel the fight was fixed, and Mike Tyson, took his money and ran, and all this stuff. What I witnessed, from an honest opinion of two men in the ring, not a WWE matchup, because, they look serious too sometimes, and we know that that's not. But what I saw Mike Tyson was 58 years old. And, was he hurt in that fight? No, he wasn't hurt. It drove me insane to hear the commentator, which is a whole nother story. I can't stand that guy. To hear them say, he's hurt. He wasn't hurt. The problem with Mike Tyson was he had no legs. He could be training, and his hand speed could be that of a 30 or 40-year-old. He was in terrific shape. All those clips we saw, he looked fantastic. But what we never saw was any footwork. We never saw him have to follow somebody around the ring. We saw him beating the hell out of heavy bags, or somebody wearing a chest protector. And when he came out into the ring with the knee brace, and he immediately looked like he was having trouble mobility-wise. To me, what we witnessed was basically a 58-year-old body that, like I said in the pre-fight show, he knows what he wants to do, but his body doesn't react. And that's what we saw. Did we see a talented Jake Paul beat the hell out of Mike Tyson? Absolutely not. Jake Paul has no talent. Okay, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. But my initial thoughts, Alex, were simple. Mike Tyson's 58 years old. We all wanted him to have the fountain of youth for just a few minutes last week, and he couldn't do it. I've heard people say he didn't go after him. He was holding back his punches. But I just think that the lack of mobility prevented Mike Tyson from doing anything other than what he did. What's your thoughts?
I agree with much of that. I think that was one of the things that I think, the old P.T. Barnum line, there's a sucker born every minute. I think the thing about Mike Tyson is he is not one of the all-time, top 5 all-time greatest heavyweight champions of the world. He is arguably one, probably top 3, maybe top 2 most popular heavyweight champions of all times, because he has that reputation of being a monster. And for a while, from 86 to 1990, he absolutely was a monster. And there were moments afterwards where he recaptured that, maybe for one fight, maybe for a couple of rounds in certain fights, certainly in interviews, and possibly in a hotel room. And I think that I love monster movies, but this was like watching the last 2 minutes of King Kong. It was very sad. And I think you're absolutely right. I think when he was coming out, walking out that tunnel with the knee brace on, as soon as I saw that knee brace, I was like, oh no. Because in all the clips they showed, carefully edited clips, by the way, that were maybe 4 seconds long, not even, he looked like a destroyer. But you never saw him have to chase anyone. You don't have to chase a guy who's holding the mitts for you. And I think everything about boxing, especially Mike Tyson, if you watch him when he was in his prime, he always had those huge thighs. All his power came up from those legs. And boxing is a foot, hip, shoulder thing. If you have no legs,
you got nothing.
Plant your foot and turn that hip, forget it. And I think that's exactly the problem. I mean, Hall of Fame boxing writer Nigel Collins always says, always bet against the guy in the knee brace. And I think that was the situation. Is I did think Jake, and I appreciate that Jake Paul went easy on him, because I think if he had moved into him, he probably could have stopped him. Even though it's Mike Tyson. I mean, Billy C., he's 58 years old. I was thinking when people kept saying, oh, well, you got to look back at his fight with Kevin McBride or look back at this fight. No, the only fight that I think was maybe something that was worth looking at was the exhibition with Roy Jones. But even that was 4 years ago. When you're in your 50s, 4 years, I mean, in dog years, he's dead. So I think that's the thing, is that 4 years, there was a point at one point, maybe a year ago, where he was being wheeled out of a hotel in a wheelchair. And he said there's been times where he's talking about sciatica. So the writing on the wall was there that he had no legs. And I think that was one of the things. It was almost like if you're in a tank, you can have all the firepower in the world in that tank. But if it's got a blown tread, you got to wait for things to get in range. Otherwise, forget it. And that was the case.
And as far as Jake Paul going easy on him, I don't know. I think Jake Paul was afraid.
I think he probably wisely, because you don't want to get too close and walk into something.
And took exactly and took it like that. Kept his distance. Look, the credit I give to Jake Paul is simply this. He's a great promoter. I mean, I have the numbers here. We'll go over in a little bit, but I mean, everybody watched that fight. The amount of money, Mike Tyson walked away with $20 million. I thought that Jake Paul was getting 30, but I was informed that he got 40 for it, So, you got to give him credit for that. He's the guy that everyone had loved to hate, and he played the villain great, Now, speaking about hating people, I try not to hate anyone, but Mario Ronaldo. let me tell you something.
Go on.
I don't know if I've ever mentioned this, but he is the worst. And the best part, I mean, look, if I heard him say he's working that body like candy's going to come out of it, and with all of those things, I mean, he just, Mamma mia, Mamma mia. I was throwing up. He was driving me to drink more scotch than I normally do. And I couldn't stand it, and then you start looking deeper. On the interviews, Roy Jones was looking at him like Roy Jones wanted to punch him right in the face. All right. And then
he would.
And then Roy Jones starts when he finally got a minute to talk. He was making no sense. He was talking like Kamala Harris, for God's sake. He was talking word salad, man. He wasn't saying anything. And I will say this. No one loves Rosie Perez more than me. She could be the queen of boxing. I love seeing her ringside. But what the hell was she doing commentating? I mean, it was terrible. And Cedric the Entertainer, please, they made it wasn't real. I mean, that all of those things just made it was like, what are you kidding me? And I actually, was talking to people. So, oh, Cedric the Entertainer, he was so cool, and I'm like, what? What?
Why was he there?
Yeah. I saw. I'm not going to mention his name because I respect the man very deeply, but somebody said, "Oh, she did a great job. She was wonderful. She was wonderful. She did a great job." Rosie Perez. I'm like, look, I love Rosie Perez. She knows boxing. I'd love to talk boxing with her, but not as a commentator. It was hard to watch, Alex.
Yeah, I thought, to me, Moro was so bad and so obnoxious, and it was just like oral diarrhea. I mean, Roy Jones could not be interrupted more. And I think Moro does this no matter who he's paired with. And they'll even go to the official or unofficial scorer, and they're like, "Oh, tell us what's going on. Tell us what's going on in the corner." And the guy will start talking, and Moro interrupts him. And it's like, dude, shut up for a minute. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable. Yeah, he's awful. And I think Rosie Perez, I didn't really understand why she's there. I guess it's because it straddled that line between this celebrity spectacle and an actual fight. Roy was the only one who made sense being there. And the only time.
Wait a minute. You thought he made sense being there. He didn't make sense. He didn't make sense verbally.
I think I don't mind him. I think he's okay. There was a couple of times where he, I don't know. Like the only time Moro was correct actually was when Tyson kept biting the thumb on his glove. That is something Mike has resorted to in the past,
but never that much.
Never that much.
Never. Right.
And that was funny because at the end they asked him, and Mike said, "I have a biting fixation." We're like, we know. So I don't know it. And I think the other thing about it is that even if you watch, like, I think even in his Broadway show, he mentioned he has a slight asthma condition. And he sure seemed, I think the other thing is just being old, is at the end, he hadn't caught his breath for like 10 minutes after the thing. He's probably incredibly sore right now and probably will be for another week. You just can't go through that at 58 years old and not have massive effects. But he's got $20 million to rub on himself. So, right. That I don't blame him for that. I blame the public for buying into the idea that, because people are stunned and thinking, oh, it must have been fixed. Well, no, it wasn't fixed more than the fact that it was a 27-year-old versus a 58-year-old. That's how it was fixed. And I think I've heard people saying that, oh, Mike Tyson wasn't allowed to throw an uppercut. You know why he couldn't throw an uppercut? You have to be in close.
Exactly.
You couldn't get close to him.
It wasn't like the Roy Jones where they weren't allowed to really go after the head.
Yeah, and there's even a clip I saw somebody posted. I try not to spend much time on social media anymore, but I did go on there briefly, I think yesterday or this morning maybe, and I saw somebody was posting something of a YouTube clip where it looks like Mike's about to throw a right hand and then he doesn't, and they're like, see, this is an agreement. Yeah. You know what it could have been also? You're seeing an old man thinking the opening's there and then realizing, oh, if I throw that, I'm going to be incredibly off balance, so I'm not going to throw it. That's what I saw. Not that, the agreement. No, it's not the agreement. I don't know. It, like I said, it was sad. As sad as the Kevin McBride one was, in a way, this was not as sad because I think it wasn't real. The Kevin McBride one was real. I was very worried that he was going to do something awful, and I was so thankful when Jeff Fenech stopped that fight.
So thankful you put it on your wall.
And I have that amazing picture by Emily Harney. Just to me, that picture is a symbol of like everything ends.
Yes.
And I think that's this fight, and the whole reason why people put it together is that the public wanted to believe, no, things are eternal. And Mike Tyson is a beast and he'll always be a beast. No, he's not a beast anymore. He's a grandpa. And I think, or will be a grandpa shortly, because his kids are like, I think he's got, or one of his kids might have kids. I don't know. But I think one of the memes I saw that I thought was very funny, and I think that this is appropriate, is that, it's a Netflix offers Jake Paul $50 million to push George Foreman down the stairs. That's what this kind of was sort of elder abuse. But they sold it as if it was legitimate, and it really wasn't. It was never legitimate.
60 million households. It was streaming on. I mean, and honestly, 50 million saw the Taylor Serrano fight, which is
that's
cool,
awesome. That's the best part, because I think there are probably little girls this week who are going into a boxing gym for the first time.
Not after they saw that cut. They might have been
maybe, yeah. Well, I bet you some still that didn't turn them off, I bet. And I think that that's great news, because and I think even if they were, because people think, oh, well, this hurt boxing, because my brother was saying he thought Serrano won. And I was like, Bren, did you score the fight? And we didn't really get into it, but personally, it was one of those things, because he was like, well, they did more harm to boxing's reputation than helping it. And I don't agree. If you meet a woman you really like and you go to the family reunion with her, wouldn't you want to meet the redheaded stepchild with no teeth that everybody is a little annoyed by that first night? That's the thing about the bad boxing decisions. It's part of the sport.
First
part
night
of our family.
The first night, no teeth. What are you getting at?
Yeah. Wouldn't you want to meet that?
I'm not touching that one, Alex. Okay. If you're going after women with no teeth, whatever. Okay.
No, what I mean is, like, the bad decisions are one of the ugly side of the sport. If you're gonna fall in love with this sport, you got to realize that bad decisions come with it. Now, I don't agree.
That wasn't a bad decision.
No, I agree. But some people thought so.
Only
some people might say,
yeah, but you know what could have swayed it? The damn punch stats that they kept putting up. Nobody,
absolutely.
These guys, a lot of these commentators can't call a fight anymore unless the punch stats are there. Right. Timothy Bradley does it. And Bernardo Nsuna, he does it. All these guys, Joe Tessitore, Tess, they call the fight. To me, that ended Jim Lampley's career, because he started calling fights based on subjective statistics, and if you're watching at home and you're listening to this, you start to sway. You start to go that way. When Timothy Bradley is saying so-and-so is winning, it's a shutout on my scorecard. And then all of a sudden the other guy wins. Now all of a sudden it's a robbery because everybody thinks they're watching something. The punch stats show, to me, Alex, the punch stats are basically looking at the audience saying, you don't know what you're seeing. Even though you see what you're seeing, you don't know. So we're going to give you the statistics so you can really, understand what's happening regardless of what you feel. And that's the way punch stats are to me. I'm totally fine. I've said it 100 times. I know you're sick of it. I'm totally fine with discussing punch stats after a fight as a conversation piece. But during the fight, I think it takes away from the fight and it sways the viewer. It's human nature.
Yeah. And I have a question as to how accurate they are. They never talk about, whether or not they're off a little.
Listen. And I don't mean to interrupt you, but listen. It's subjective. We discussed it on this show years ago. You, me, and Joe Schmo could be watching the same fight, and I think the punch landed. From your view, you thought it grazed it. From the other view, it didn't even come close. There's 3 different scores. And ESPN did it with that one time where they had the cameras on the judges and you could see it. And actually, my man Bob I saw him at Turning Stone, and he sent me, and I meant to bring it up and put it on the screen. He sent me a photo where the cameramen were taking shots behind the judges, and they showed the same punch and the difference in what it looks like to that judge from the location that they're sitting. And, whether if they're scoring the fight, whether they think they're landing more or a punch that landed didn't really land. I mean, look, as well as anyone that a lot of fighters have a tendency to feel comfortable in a certain area of the ring. And if that area is, for argument's sake, in front of the blue corner, and they always try to get their opponent there, and the three views, one of the judges can't really see that well from his viewpoint, his scorecard's going to be different. And that's why you see these scorecards a lot of times. And I'm giving the judges credit because I think for the most part we have some really good judges and referees out there for that matter. And, you see three judges scores, two guys are pretty similar. And then there's that one, not the guy that always scores the draw, but the other one that's a little different. It could have been his vantage point.
Right. And I think the other thing is that nowadays, a lot of times the CompuBox or whatever, they seem to have a different name. Maybe DAZN was using a different name for it this week. But they are at home. So they're watching what we're watching. And I'm sorry, Taylor and Serrano, some of those exchanges were so quick. Even if you're tracking just one fighter, you're supposed to hit the buttons, miss land, and power punch or jab. You're supposed to do that quick. I'm sorry. I don't believe that it's 100% accurate.
No, it can't be.
But they treat it as if it is.
I know.
And they talk about it as if it is. And and they make it seem like the fight should go one way or the other because of them on solely on that basis. And that's not how a sport is called. That's not how the sport is judged.
No. And not only that, but and my man Bob's in the chat room right now. He says they can't be accurate because they only have one angle. And that's true, and that's why you have three judges, to try to have the most fair, scores as possible.
Yeah, and I think this was a case where when the fact that it was, because a lot of times, we see a split decision, like you were just saying, you see one judge that's way off, then you have another judge that sees it just a shade for the wrong fighter, and then the other judge sees it the way that a lot of people agree, and that's how you end up, having a bad decision with no fingerprints. But this was not a case like that. This wasn't even a split decision. They were all unanimous with the exact same score. So to me, and the crowd's upset. That crowd couldn't find a more uneducated boxing crowd than if you just invited them off the street.
Well,
because these were people that believed Mike Tyson was going to give a YouTuber, that was going to make for a good fight.
One of the best things I saw.
It was a freak show.
Well, it was. Listen, my man Coach has been saying this for.
I just wanted him to kill him. I was wondering how many rosaries do I have to say for Mike Tyson to kill Jake Paul?
No, I know. Even my daughter called me. She could care less about boxing, right? She calls me. She says, "I just want Tyson to destroy that a-hole. I can't stand him." But that's the success that he has done.
Yeah,
he has welcomed the bad guy. Coach is saying, he's been saying this for a long, long time about the WWE. Boxing's become WWE, and Jake Paul is making that a reality. As soon as the fight's over, Jake Paul says, "I want to offer Canelo a payday." All right, now, to me that was comical because Canelo already makes $40 million a fight.
He doesn't need Jake Paul.
But then Mayweather got into the mix, and him too. Coach sent me a link with him, and he too wants a shot.
Mayweather already had a fight with the other one, right? With Logan Paul, I think.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, Listen, make no mistake, Mayweather needs money. He wouldn't be doing it. He spends his money and he owes the government and all of this stuff. But all these fighters just see a money grab here. Danny Dubois is calling him out for a heavyweight. Look,
yeah, I'd like to see him if he wants to fight a
won't.
journeyman.
And
Fight Derek Chisora.
listen,
Imagine Jake
exactly
Paul versus Derek Chisora.
Look, let's just take a look. These current rankings, okay? Forget heavyweight. Let's look at cruiserweight, right? Pick any one in any ranking, and I don't even mean computer ranking. I mean any of the sanctioning bodies rankings. I mean, forget the top guys. Like, even if you go down to 10 and below, I mean, a lot of these guys, Machunu. You think Machunu couldn't beat the snot out of Jake Paul? I mean, Masternak, who's even older. These guys, Furat, Arsalan, these guys are all cruiserweights that he wouldn't stand a chance against. Forget a heavyweight, Danny Dubois. Come on.
Oh yeah, I mean, if he was to fight somebody like a journeyman heavyweight, they would wheel him, what remains of him, in a wheelbarrow back to that beautiful speed skater girlfriend.
Look, yeah, geez, I didn't know speed skaters were so tall. She seemed pretty tall.
Oh, she's a knockout.
Yeah, but
that's the only knockout he's scored.
Yeah, that's the closest thing to a real knockout he's getting. But the truth of the matter is that the only real fighter, and I'm not including Mike Tyson because Mike Tyson was 58 years old, but the only real fighter that he fought, he lost to, and that was Fury, the Fury brother. Tommy Fury. He lost to him. What happened to the rematch? Now Joel has asked me if I saw the Oliver McCall fight on Tuesday. We had Oliver.
Yeah, I didn't know that was happening.
Well, look, here's the thing, and I got into it with somebody on social media recently about that. And here's the thing, and I said this on our pre-fight show. Maybe it is time because people are in better condition and some of these guys are physically fit, not only physically but mentally too, where they could still fight. But you don't put a 50-something odd year old guy in with a 30-year-old or a 20-something. You put him in with another 50-year-old guy, so that the deterioration of the skill sets are equal. And Oliver McCall fought Stacy Bigfoot Frazier on Tuesday in Tennessee and destroyed him, knocked him out in I believe the second round. But to me, and I remember having this discussion when we first started this show 20-something years ago, when Larry Holmes was trying to fight George Foreman. And they wanted to call it the Geezers at Caesars, right? And they were both older, and it is what it is, I mean, look, I'm not so sure how many people would want to see 50-year-olds fighting 50-year-olds, but at least if they had a senior division of some kind, you would see more of an evenly matched fight. I don't think it's safe. And although I've always been an advocate for basically, what you're getting into before they sign the papers. I mean, who was it that said nobody should get hit like that? What's his name?
Victor Ortiz.
That's right. Nobody should get hit like that. And I remember doing the show saying, yeah, not if you're a doctor, a lawyer, a construction worker, but if you're a boxer, you gotta be expecting that a little bit, no, Vic? But
you go into prize fighting, you're gonna expect getting hit in the head.
You gotta expect that, But the safety aspect is true, and I think that if because you're gonna start to get this age discrimination, potential lawsuits, and all this stuff, and if a person that's older can pass all the medical requirements, pass all the exams, can demonstrate that they're physically fit and they want to fight and they say it's their livelihood, blah, blah, blah. And you can't really say no. Well, then protect them a little further by putting them in with somebody similar, and have a champion in that division. I mean, geez, we have enough. We have so many belts now, Alex. I mean, what's the difference? You add a old timers division or a senior division, and the sanctioning bodies can make some more money. I mean,
Well, if they're that old, maybe they should, instead of a belt, they should get suspenders.
whatever, or get unlimited life supply or Geritol or something. I don't know, but but here's some interesting things about this fight, Jake Paul against Mike Tyson. At the end of the fight, they had a what do they call it? Basically a statistic where they started looking at numbers and just Instagram followers. The night of the fight, Jake Paul had like over 27 million, and Mike Tyson had over 31 million. Right after the fight, on the 18th, November 18th, Jake Paul picked up another little less than 1.5 million. Mike Tyson picked up 2.5 million. So from a perspective of today's modern day followers or views or whatever, Mike Tyson did better than Jake Paul. So maybe that'll help his what's his place we went to in Vegas, something 13.
Oh yeah, what is it? Planet
13, right?
Something like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that sounds right.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing about it, is that it is fascinating though, because I was talking. I do a movie club on Zoom, and I got there a little early the other night, and there was a couple of guys in there, and they were saying they know that I love boxing, and so they were saying, is Mike Tyson one of the greatest fighters of all time, greatest heavyweights of all time? And I said, he's up there, but no, I would put him like in the top dozen, but he's not in the top 5. And they were stunned. And I said, in terms of popularity, he's, he could be number 2, maybe number 3. But and then one of them asked Chat GPT or one of those AI things, and it said, Bill, the top 3 heavyweight champions of all time: Muhammad Ali, Joe Louis, Mike Tyson. So it's like, to me that's ridiculous, because it's to just to put him above it. And this was a problem I had when Ibro did the all-time great list recently. He is, even with Ibro, he is listed above Evander Holyfield. I'm sorry, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but you know what's part of that, and it has to be part of the equation. And I've said this too, when I start thinking of all-time greats, the skill set, of course, has to be in the mix, right? But you also have to look at what that individual brought to the sport of boxing. Was it good? Was it bad? I mean, look, Harry Greb was one of the greatest middleweight fighters of all time. He was already considered an old man at 30-something years old, 32 years old. He was already blind in one eye, still fighting. I saw a stat where, and I'm probably going to be off by a couple of fights, but, Mayweather brags about his 50-0 record. Well, Harry Greb fought 50 fights in 1 year, I think it was, So, Stanley Ketchel, another guy that was a great fighter, was shot and killed in his 20s. These are guys that, were great fighters, talent-wise, and should be mentioned. But, they didn't have, that popularity. I mean, look, Jack Dempsey is one of my all-time favorite fighters. I love Jack Dempsey. Very similar to Mike Tyson in his popularity. People loved him. His bar in the city, I mean, even, to his last breath, people loved Jack Dempsey, and he's in a lot of people's top 10 all-time great heavyweights. He's in mine, but was he a top 10 heavyweight? Was he as good as Evander Holyfield? I mean, from pure boxing skill, he was an animal. And during his day, he was vicious, but he was still only 180 pounds. How's he going to fight? How's he going to fight Tyson Fury or even Daniel Dubois, a guy that's coming up now? So I don't know, man. I think that the popularity is something that's kind of thrown in that mix when when you start talking about all-time greats.
Well, and I think that popularity has grown in terms of it, people, putting that right aside greatness and accomplishments. I mean, look at the fact that Arturo Gatti is in the Hall of Fame. Now, granted, people could say, "Well, wait a minute. It says right there in the name, Hall of Fame." So it doesn't say Hall of Greatness or Hall of Boxing Acumen. It's Hall of Fame. So yeah, I mean, this is one of those, and I think that's another one of the measures that I'm not sure that that's a major measure, is how would this guy do against this guy. I think you got to look at, like, how did he do against Hall of Famers? Mike's 2-2, and he blew out Larry Holmes, who was out of shape, who Don King came on the door, and Larry was on the couch, and Don King was like, "Hey, I want you to fight Mike Tyson," and Larry was like, "No way, I'm retired." And he said, "Well, wait a minute, I'll give you $3 million. Where do I sign?"
Yeah, wait a minute. Let me get my slippers.
Yeah, exactly. And Michael Spinks came to the ring in a knee brace. And I think then the other two Hall of Famers that flattened Mike were Lennox Lewis and Evander Holyfield. And Lennox Lewis in 2002 was fighting a shadow. Mike Tyson at that time was a shadow of himself. And look at how intimidated. If you want to see mild-mannered Emmanuel Stewart, angrier than you probably ever seen him, is look at him in that fight when Lennox Lewis comes back to the corner and he just lets loose on him with a slew of profanity, because Lennox is like intimidated to get in there and stop him. He's like, "You got a dead man in front of you." But that was the thing. Mike Tyson was able to conjure this intimidation factor. And I think that was one of the things that, if you watch the pre-fight documentaries, and I use that term, it's more propaganda on Netflix, they glossed over so much. They only had one guy in there that was actually a writer from the Mike Tyson days. And he is someone who, and that was Wally Matthews. I think he just got into the IBHOF this past summer. And he was there for, Mike Tyson's heyday. He wrote for the New York papers. And he, more than anyone else, was a guy who used to point out that Mike Tyson is a bully. If you can get past that, there's not a lot there. Now, granted, of course, in his prime, that is a way easier said than done. But I think that was one of the things, is that they never quite let him say that, because everything we saw Friday night was predicated on the fact that that bully and that intimidation is everlasting. And it's not.
In a way, it is. Because I mean, look, it isn't.
If you imagine, but look, we know ourselves, Bill. Remember, it wasn't in Evander Holyfield's mind. Remember when he came to the ring singing?
I'll never forget it.
Yeah, and I knew a man who was moved by the spirit.
Listen, I said it the other day, and I'll say it again. I've said it a million times. There's two ring walks that I'll never forget. They're etched in my mind, and the first one was Evander Holyfield coming down, and everybody else was just waiting for Tyson to kill him that night. And I looked at him, and I remember saying, "I think Mike's in trouble tonight." I mean, he looked like he knew something that no one else did. And then the other ring walk I'll never forget is the look of total fear that as they were pushing him towards the ring. Michael Spinks, when he was going at the fight Tyson, he was waiting to find a spot to get knocked out in.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing about Evander Holyfield, was like a Joan of Arc in short pants, because it really was. He is a deeply religious, deeply spiritual guy, and he knew he had pure faith, And faith is taking that leap when you don't see the stairs. And that's the kind of guy he was. And that's the way he fought. And if you watch that first fight, the very first punch Mike throws, they come to the center of the ring. Mike launches an overhand right, and it catches Evander. And for a second, Evander's hurt. And Mike is like, oh, whoa, you're hurt. And he lunges at him. That's the last time Mike had that kind of success. For the rest of the fight, Evander beats him to that in close position and, takes him apart.
Evander Holyfield, I had the luxury of meeting him. He's a nasty guy, but he had the best recuperative powers I've ever witnessed in the ring. George Foreman had him. All George had to do was walk over to him a little quicker than he plodded over, and he would have finished him. And in that 2 seconds it took him to walk across the ring, when he knocked him all the way on the other side, he recovered. But talk about, you mentioned ring walks. We mentioned those 2 ring walks, but I'll tell you something. Credit to Jake Paul. Prior to Friday night, the 2 best ring walks I think I ever saw. Look, Hector Macho Camacho always had an interesting ring walk. I mean, his get-ups, his outfits, they were always very entertaining. But the 2 that stand out in my mind was Jorge Arce came out one time on a horse. Okay, he rode a horse out. Okay, and that was great. The other one, which I thought was really the best one ever, was what's his name? Prince Ahmad comes out on a flying carpet. Remember the one where he came out on a flying carpet, right? I mean, I thought that was great. But Jake Paul comes out in a truck. I mean, come on, he drives the truck. I mean, I thought that was kind of cool. That was a cool ring walk, but that's where it ended. My next question is, is this, has this changed boxing? Because, we're seeing these guys, they all want a piece of this. Jake Paul, we all know, we're boxing purists. We all know that Jake Paul is not a boxer, as much as he works hard at it. I give him credit. He works hard. Whatever, juice he's drinking, he's obviously gotten bigger and stronger. But he's not I'm sorry, I can't consider him a legitimate fighter, but that doesn't diminish his promotional talent, his acceptance of being the bad guy, and the fact that his phone has blown up with people that are willing to get in the ring with him because of the money. Is it going to change the sport? I was afraid of what would happen to boxing if this exact outcome happened. I talked about it prior to the fight last Friday night. And, this could change the sport, Alex, forever, because now the focal point is on those big dollars. What about all these guys that are busting their tails in the gyms, trying to get shots, trying to work their way up, trying to make a name for themselves? Are they ever going to get the chance? And when are these younger fighters going to turn around and say, you know what am I getting punched for? Why am I, busting my ass in this gym every day, making the sacrifices I'm sacrificing, when I can watch a YouTube guy step in the ring and make more money than, I personally, he made more money that night than I would ever have dreamed of seeing in my life, let alone making in one night. I mean, he was bragging about spending $1 million on his trunks.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts? I mean, do you think we're gonna see more and more of this?
I think unfortunately, I think that there's always going to be a market for these kind of sideshows that, but I don't think that they really have to do with the sport. This one, the only reason it did is that, the undercard had legitimacy to it. Mike Tyson, of course, was once legitimate, but the main event, there was nothing, it was a sideshow. I was surprised that they allowed people to bet on it, but again,
not everywhere,
because it's like, if they could make money on that, they're going to do it. Because to me, I wasn't even sure. And even Roy Jones had mentioned, I saw a little clip of him when after Mike Tyson had slapped Jake Paul at the weigh-in, he said, this makes me think it's for real. And it was like, wow, the guy who's going to be the commentator doesn't even know if it's real.
Yeah.
But I think because he pointed out how Mike has always been a very emotional guy, and the fact that he's emotional here, that might work for him. It does. You can be as emotional as you want to be at 50 or 8 years old. If your legs don't work, don't worry about it.
I think that's why he was biting his glove more.
I think he realized
it was frustration that he couldn't.
Oh yeah, I think he immediately knew. Oh damn it, I got no legs. And even if he had him, because one of the things he was doing that I saw in training that I'm not sure this is a wise thing, because when you're old, you want to train smarter. You don't want to train harder because you could injure yourself. And one of the things he was doing was these really, really intense sprints. If you're in your 20s, okay. But you're in your 50s, what about just some light, long distance running or some light just walking?
But Alex, we have
the idea that he wanted. I think that's one of the things that's unfortunate about Mike Tyson, and does kind of, it's a problem with his all-time greatness. Also, great fighters as they age adapt their style. Mike Tyson's style was a young man's style. He never could really adapt to it. Let me think about George Foreman. When he was older, the old George Foreman fights different than the younger Foreman. Whereas Mike Tyson, he always had that come forward, explode, almost like, a snake needs some striking distance. You need leg power, because Mike would be able to close that distance. The only guy who does it right now pretty effectively is Canelo. Now, Canelo doesn't have the power Mike Tyson did, but Canelo is able to be in front of you, close that distance, and then back out again. Mike was an expert at that. The problem was that Mike couldn't really fight inside. As much as people thought, oh, well, don't get him inside. Yeah, but he can't fight in there. That's what Evander Holyfield proved. Evander could fight inside better. That's why Mike got clinched so much, because he'd fight his way in, and he needs to be in close because he has such short arms. But then once he's inside, he's so close to you, he has no punching room, so he'd end up getting clinched. But I do think that you need those legs in order to close the gap, and the way he might have just in the training, he might have just put too much stress on them. I don't know.
Listen,
that they were gone already.
Yes, his legs were gone already. The training videos and clips we saw were just that, clips. You can't assume that he was doing
heavily edited.
And the other thing, just to comment on your point, so Mike Tyson learned his trade, how to fight, how to move his head, all those things under the tutelage of Customato. When Customato passed, he never really had anyone else that taught him anything else. Kevin Rooney is a protege of Customato, and they maintained that training, that style, okay? When you look at other fighters that have rolled with the changes and learned how to do other things, when the going got tough, they always revert back to what comes naturally to them, what comes naturally, what they know the most. So if Mike Tyson did learn to all of a sudden box on his toes like a Muhammad Ali, the minute he got in trouble, he would revert automatically, because it's human nature, back to the bob and weave style. But Mike never knew anything else. When he started changing trainers and going with this one and that one, they were just rah-rah men. That's it. He never really learned anything else. So all Mike knows is what we've seen over him. And he can't do that at 58. Listen, It was a money grab fight, whether it was real, whether it wasn't, who the hell knows? We'll never know. Jake Paul says he let him off the hook. I find that hard to believe. I think he would have knocked him out if he could have. I just don't think he has the talent, but maybe I'm wrong. One of the other best parts of this event was listening to Shaquille O'Neal and Gronk when on the spot. And I guess that woman, I don't know who she was. She must be really short because I mean, listen, Shaquille O'Neal is a monster, and so is Gronk, but she looked like she was 2 feet tall, But they started going back and forth. Yeah, we're fighting each other, and it was funny. It was funny, They did it off the cuff, and that's the kind of thing I'm afraid of now.
Yeah.
We start seeing that,
Well, but I think, I don't know, like I mentioned, I love monsters. My two favorite monsters are King Kong and Dracula.
Hey, wait,
So
I want to ask you, wait, before you go on, I want to ask you that you reminded me because I was going to ask you before. Did you ever see the movie now, the original King Kong, right, in the 30s? Did you ever see The Son of Kong?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, that was a comedy.
When he
Yes,
dies, he gives a thumbs up.
as he's going down,
He's drowning. He gives a thumbs up.
Said he gives a thumb up as he's going all the way down. Oh man, I watched that one for the first time, and I thought, oh, this is cool. And I'm watching. I'm going, wait a minute, this is a comedy. I mean, it was a comedy. It
was, yeah, definitely much more of a comedy.
Yeah,
but no, and I think Larry Merchant always would say, you can't save boxing and you can't kill it. And that's just like Dracula, but Dracula's the same way. Now, I do think that and I think people love fights. So that's why there probably will be markets for these kind of sideshows forever. Sadly, the guys and men and women who toil in the gym will never make the money that these influencers make, that probably Gronk and Shaquille O'Neal would make if they had an exhibition. And is that sad and heartbreaking? Absolutely. But again, if you're a boxer, you probably know it because I'm all quotes here today. But remember what Joe Frazier said, boxing is the only sport where you get your brain shook, your money took, and your name in the Undertaker book.
Yeah.
And that's why it is different than all these sideshows. And what we had that Latino night, those are some great fights. Those guys will probably never make anywhere near what Mike Tyson and Jake Paul saw. And is that a criminal heartbreaker? Yes. Well, but that is the way of the world. And that is,
you just reminded me.
Late stage capitalism, my friend. That's what we get.
You just reminded me. I was talking to an Undertaker friend of mine, and he said, you should buy a coffin. And I said, that's the last thing I need.
Exactly.
So listen, I got a email I want to read that I want you to comment on. It's from my man Jordan, and he's been following the show for a long time. He's out of the UK. I think he's even working out of someplace else now, but he says, hey, Billy C, I can't stand this goes by what a lot of people were saying. I can't stand those Paul brothers. To even have the desire to fight an old-time great marks you, in my opinion, as a bad guy. And the way Logan responded to Mike in the ring shows he's cut from the same cloth. I'm 36 years old, only 9 years older than that moron. But it seems to me that generation after mine lacks certain principles and has no respect for their elders. I know that you'll have listeners that doesn't apply to, but forgive me for my rant. It wasn't pleasant to watch as a fan of boxing in general, but also a huge Mike Tyson fan. On the fight, I was actually just happy that Mike didn't get dropped or knocked out, which sadly was my prediction. From the feedback, it appears the casuals don't appreciate how Mike moved for the first round and a half, cutting the distance with his speed, but just couldn't pull the trigger once he had slipped a shot and was in range. There's a great clip online of early in the fight. Mike slips a shot in his textbook manner, and Paul visibly panics when he realizes he's missed because he's expecting a counter that sadly never came. On another note, the prospect of Ramirez and Opatai now is mouthwatering, even for me. Short Turkey will get that sorted out before Rider season is out. He says, excuse my rant, mate. Just had a vent. Looking forward to the next show. Jordan, you can vent with us anytime. I think that the way Jordan feels, Alex, is the way most of us that are diehard boxing fans and Mike Tyson fans feel. We all, Dave, my man Dave in the chat room before was busting my chops because I thought that Mike Tyson would win the fight. But the truth of the matter is I went with my heart. I wanted Mike Tyson to win the fight. I wanted him to. It would have been a victory for all us old MFers, but sadly, nobody, Father Time is undefeated. We talked about that in the past many times, and it's the same old adage. When do you say when? And I talked about this on the pre-fight show. Athletes, star athletes, whether they're boxers or football players or basketball players or baseball players, that their athleticism is so far above the normal guy. We even sit on the couch watching a football game. Oh, so-and-so sucks. He's terrible. He's terrible. He's better than anybody you've ever met in your life. You couldn't even, you're not even talented enough to be the water boy, So, and so only those level athletes know, what goes on in your mind. And like an athlete or just someone aging that learns from life's experiences, that you wish you could do it over. If I knew then what I know now, that comment. Well, it's the same thing for an athlete. They know what they need to do. I'm sure Mike knew what he needed to do and went to do it, but his body just said, hold on, I got to take a rest. You know what I mean? And that's the truth. And that's why, if, thank the Lord that, there's so many people that are older, that are in fantastic shape, and they want to do these things, then I think that it's up to the sport to create a senior league for them to compete against like opponents, not this kind of stuff where you have a guy who feels he's great, can do the workouts, can run the runs, can do all the things that he's going to do until he gets in the ring with a person that's 20 or years or more younger and realize that I don't care how good you were, you're not the same, So I think that's what needs to be revisited today. I don't know what else to say. The fight itself was a huge success financially. It was a huge success for Netflix. They plan on really jumping into the sport of boxing as well as football. I saw football on there, and baseball they want to get into. So, I mean, look, it's just a modern way of bringing, sports and any other entertainment to the masses. I said this on this show years ago, that I predicted that the future would be something that you're paying for what you like. And I used it as sports. I thought, you like boxing, you're going to pay a fee and then get all the boxing that's available. And all of a sudden, well, that's what the Zone is. That's what ESPN Plus is. Netflix. I like movies. Well, guess what? You see, who did they recycle? They would promote a movie that the guys were Ralph Macchio, like a Karate Kid. They have Ralph Macchio at the Tyson event.
Yeah, see, it's very easy to believe it was the 80s.
But Bob's saying in the chat, give my shout out to Rick. Bob's saying he heard that Top Rank's leaving ESPN for Netflix. Hey, you know what? Top Rank has a sweet deal with ESPN. I can only imagine what Netflix would offer. Netflix has so much money. It's like the Turkey al-Rashid.
They're going to have to do something about their streaming situation, though, because they really
blew it up.
They're not set up for that kind of a live stream from a single site.
But they could only project what they were going to do, right? They could only project.
So this was like a test, I
mean, the truth of the matter is that if they really want to get into it, they need to do real fights against real fighters. And if you have a guy like Turkey al-Rashid who's willing to pay these fighters, look, the reason why he's making these big fights that we want to see is because he's opening up his check. That's the only reason. We all sit here and I say it myself. Oh, he doesn't want to fight this one. Oh, he called it. Tank Davis. Calls out Shakir Stevenson, then fights a non-entity fight. Same thing. They all do it. Well, the reason is because it's risk versus reward. If all of a sudden there's a couple extra zeros on the end of the paycheck, then they're going to get in and fight whoever, because the fear of the loss isn't going to affect them as much because their life just changed with the money.
Yeah.
But any final thoughts, Alex?
Well, I just think that, it is one of those things that we probably will see more of it, just because it was successful in terms of them making a lot of money. So, when anytime something's successful, they're going to do it again. I don't think that it, I think that the Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano fight certainly helped boxing. And the other fight, whose name I completely blanked on right now, but the fight before it was decent. It wasn't as great.
Barros let me down.
Yes,
How could he draw? He
Barrios fight.
Yeah,
but it was a good fight. But I do think that I think they were overselling it, of course, but that's what Mauro Ranallo is there to do, to oversell things. Mamma mia!
How does he still? Why did they give him those gigs?
I guess the young people like him. I mean, one of the things that is interesting about this is that, Jake Paul has that attitude, has that persona of the heel. People don't like him, but they want to see him.
Just like Mayweather.
Yeah. And I think
I bought every one of Mayweather's fights in praying that he would lose.
But I think that's also, that is, like Coach says, that is a pro wrestling thing. There are lots of pro wrestlers that people that are absolutely beloved wrestlers that are like the bad guy.
I love them.
And that's why and I think that's where, Jake Paul's audience is that they can't stand him. Yet if he's in the room, they'd run over and get his autograph. So, and they would talk about what a jerk. He's such a jerk. Oh my God, look, he signed my shirt.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, there's something about that. People like that. So, but I do think that these are the situations when these things happen, sadly, it's kind of like Mayweather-Pacquiao, when that finally happened, it was so overripe. It was like getting a beautiful peach off the ground. And so when you got that off the ground, it was more spectacle than it was contest, because it was so past its prime.
When you picked it up off the ground, there was a worm in it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing about it, is that, so who was that good for? It wasn't good for boxing. It was good for Mayweather and Pacquiao.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that you'll get with these type of events. If Jake Paul keeps putting decent fights on the undercard, then it's almost like you will get a little taste of honey with the big spoonful of the crappy medicine taste.
Yeah, but he's got to stop with this "I'm a real boxer" shit, because
the
only way he could become a boxer is to climb the ranks like any other boxer. But
and he's not. He doesn't want to do that. He's found a way
to work.
Right. He's found a workaround because of who he is. And,
Hey, listen, he's making a ton of money. I credit him for that. I credit him for his promotional company. He's got some good fighters underneath him. So as far as Jake Paul, the businessman, I respect the kid, and he's doing extremely well. As far as being a boxer, he's no boxer. And as far as, having Mike Tyson on his resume now, at 58 years old, that means nothing. But, hey, I wanted to say, we talk about boxing movies all the time. I'm way over. I got to go. But we talk about boxing movies all the time. And, Harder They Fall and Requiem of Heavyweight, some of these older boxing movies are always my favorite. I like the first Rocky, but I stumbled across one that I watched. I don't know if you've ever seen it, and if you never did, you got to watch it. It's a similar story. There was a movie that was made in the 30s, then it was remade, called The Champ, and that movie, I think Ryan O'Neal.
Ryan O'Neal, yeah.
In the 70s, he played that character, and that the whole story of that. Well, it was a great storyline. But I stumbled across a movie, an older movie, starring Kirk Douglas, and it was called Champion. That was the name of the movie. What a great movie! And I'll tell you, a couple of things that I noticed about that movie was, it took place in the movie was 50s time frame, and they filmed it in some gyms and stuff. And I touched on this briefly last week, but the gyms in those days were packed with fighters. I mean, just guys that were working out, and managers, the sleazy manager that says, all right, I'll think about taking you on and ripping you off. You know what I mean? And Kirk Douglas plays a character in this movie. It has I'm not going to ruin it for you if you never saw it, but it has a similar ending as the champ. But check it out if you ever get a chance. I think you would like it.
I definitely will. I actually just saw another great Kirk Douglas movie last week called Ace in the Hole. That's a great movie.
I tell you,
get a chance to see.
I saw that when you know what, I don't remember, but another one.
It's pretty great. And just to talk about the media being just so scummy. Yeah, it's really good.
He was also in a movie. It was a wartime movie where he basically was being ordered to lead his guys to slaughter.
Is that Kubrick's Paths to Glory? Maybe
something like, yeah. That's he had some great stuff. The worst thing I ever heard about him was the accusations concerning Natalie Wood, but because I love Natalie Wood. But in any event, hey, listen, we got to go. We did well over our time. Thank you, boys and girls, for yes, Coach is saying Midge. That's it. Midge Kelly was his character's name in Champion. But I want to thank everybody for joining us. We will not be doing a show next week because it's Turkey Day. I'm going to be stuffing my face, so we won't be here, but we will be back the first week in December. So enjoy Thanksgiving. There's not many fights on between now and December. So we'll be back here in 2 weeks. So make sure you tune in. Same bat time, same bat channel. Until then, I'll leave you with this. Ciao, baby. Have a good one. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.